AskReddit by Spectacles88. What famous person did horrible things that people largely forgot about? Remember when a 16-year-old girl overdosed in Don Henley's house? He pled guilty to minor misdemeanor charges and then wrote a song about how mean the media was to him? Because I feel like almost no one does. Is that what dirty laundry is about? Boy George abducted and tortured a man in 2007. Now he's a man with conversation and X200B. Edit. Okay, this went a bit nuts. Thanks for the gold. Glad I could make some of you laugh. Cheers. Floyd Mayweather beat the shit out of his former girlfriend and got away with it because the judge allowed him to train for a fight he was headlining. Let's not act like there was just one woman he beat the shit out of. He served 60 days for one of the at least 3 women that he has had charges filed for beating up. Copied from article about the Peter, Paul and Mary singer's assault on a 14-year-old girl. Peter Yarrow's 1981 pardon from President Jimmy Carter for taking indecent liberties with a child should have been a much bigger deal, but it was quickly overshadowed by the freeing of the American hostages in Iran just hours later. But now, decades later, a new Washington Post piece revisits the controversial pardon of the folk singer, of Peter, Paul and Mary fame, and reveals that Yarrow may have preyed upon other underage girls. That's disturbing since I went to the same elementary school he did, and he came to perform several times. They basically taught us to revere him. I think they still have a lot of stuff named after him. Robert H. Richards IV. Richards, who's the heir to the DuPont family's estimated $14 billion, was arrested in 2009 for repeatedly sexually assaulting his 3-year-old daughter. The billionaire offered to take a polygraph test to clear his name, but he failed the exam and eventually confessed to the charges. He should have received a sentence of potentially 30 years in prison, but his lawyers were able to change the charge to 4th-degree rape, and he was given 8 years in prison. However, the court believed he wouldn't fare well in prison, so his sentence was suspended and he was freed on probation. Deleted. S. Curtis Kurt Johnson. The billionaire whose family owned the household products company, SC Johnson, was arrested in March 2011 for molestation. Faced with a potential 40-year sentence for repeatedly assaulting his teenage stepdaughter, the businessman, who was worth an estimated $4.2 billion in 2019, only received 3 months in prison and a fine of $6,000. Alongside the short prison term and the fine that hardly made a dent in his fortune, Johnson also didn't have to register as a sex offender. SC Johnson, a family company. Edit. Thank you for all the upvotes, awards, and especially gold. Fuck that dude. Cheryl Cole beat the living daylights out of a toilet attendant in 2003 when she was Cheryl Tweedy. Jared Leto. Bro really raped and sexually assaulted underage girls, and so much people act like he's done nothing wrong. Not even any D-Law movie drops. He's still consistently hired all around, and it's the dumbest shit in the world. He also literally ran a cult at one point in time. I'm not sure if he still does, but he claimed to be a leader for a group of people who idolized him and followed his every word. Really crazy shit. Vince Neil only got 30 days and he killed somebody. Not only killed somebody, he also severely injured 2 other motorists and pretty much killed the career momentum of Hanoi Rocks dead in its tracks. Philip Burke, film industry executive, journalist, and film critic, sexually assaulted Brendan Fraser, and his defense was it was in jest, not sexual intent, which then he got off for it. Had any of us used that defense, we would have been buried under the jail. Not only that, but it derailed Fraser's career. I love him, and his resurgence is so long overdue it's not even funny. The fact that any person thinks it's okay to do that kinda thing is disgusting, and Brendan likely won't ever forget that day. Not that famous, but singer Gloria Trevi was an accomplice to the kidnapping and rape of several girls between the ages of 9 and 14. She got a joke of a sentence and now people idolize her because she's so brave after all she's been through. Fortunately, a US law exception allowed 2 of the victims to open a new case against her, this time in US courts where corruption from Mexico can't protect her. Hoping she gets what she deserves. Alexander Graham Bell, yes, the telephone guy, campaigned for and eventually helped to outlaw sign language in both deaf and hearing schools. https://www.disabilitymuseum.org/dhm/edu/sa.html?id59 hoping to integrate schools with both deaf and hearing students. Instead, he ended up depriving deaf students who were not able to hear of language. The last of these laws banning sign in the US was finally repealed in 1979. Canada didn't finish ridding themselves of these laws until 2010. I remember looking up Bell's wiki for unrelated reasons and learning he was a huge proponent of eugenics. Not that I idolized him or anything, but it certainly was heavier than I was in the mindset for. Loki, Cole Malone. He literally impregnated a 13-year-old girl when he was 20. Fucking disgusting. It's not to say that no one talks about it, because sometimes it is brought up. But me and several of my basketball friends didn't know about it until we were in our late teens despite following the NBA consistently. Also, the NBA never really disowned him and he's still revered as one of the all-time greats despite his unforgivable actions. Not true. She was 13 when she gave birth, but 12 when he impregnated her. Salvador Dali found a thrill in torturing and killing living things, both animals and humans. He tried to kill his sister and one of his lovers. He tortured and killed animals. George Orwell wrote a scathing condemnation of our willingness to overlook what a horrible sociopath he was just so that he might paint us another pretty picture. A summary. www.theguardian blog/2009/John/George Orwell art critic Salvador Dali. The original article. TTP. www.georgeorwell.org benefit of clergy. Some notes on Salvador Dali /0html. About a decade ago I worked with this old guy who claimed to have been friends with Salvador Dali when he was younger. He said he sometimes hung out with Dali when he was painting and Dali would occasionally convince women to come back to his studio to let him paint them in the nude. Then Dali and this guy would jerk off to the naked women together. I'm not sure which would be worse, that story being true or an 80-plus-year-old man making up a story about jerking off with Salvador Dali and telling it to me, a then 25-year-old woman. John Travolta sexually assaulted several young men, and has seemingly faced no repercussions from this. You'll be receiving calls from the Church of Scientology soon. At this point, asking which famous person didn't do horrible things is probably a shorter list. Last night Jim Gaffigan retweeted the GoFundMe for my little sister's emergency medical care and donated to it. Stand up guy, Mr. Gaffigan. Don King stomped an employee to death after pistol whipping him over $600 that he claimed the man owed him in the form of a gambling debt. Then, probably with no small amount of lobbying on his part, the Cleveland City Council considered renaming the same street where it happened after him. No, not after the victim, Sam Garrett, but after the man who, again, stomped him to death, who was convicted, although he unfortunately only served just shy of 4 years in prison. After which, he was and is a free man, while Sam Garrett, obviously, is still deceased. Not quite only in America, but man, there are too many stories like this. And seemingly more with each passing day. It would be nice to have a functioning justice system. Worthless pieces of shit like Don King will eventually go the way of all flesh, whether they go on to burn in hell for eternity or not, but there should be some accounting in this life, as well. The Marcos family in the Philippines. They are back in power after cleverly gaming the May 2022 presidential elections. They systemically looted the country for 2 decades and initiated a policy of exporting Filipinos to other countries as slaves. The Philippines never recovered. You forgot about how they've also brainwashed the current generation into thinking martial law was good and the Marcos family was good for the economy. Travis Scott essentially leaving his manager for dead in the studio. His loyal ex-manager who suffered from seizures had one while Travis was with him. Travis abandoned him while it was happening and went home, then texted him firing him a day later saying, "I can't have a manager who's shaking on the ground and shit." The lack of empathy continued with Astroworld. As someone married to a man with epilepsy, this makes me so angry. Fuck Travis Scott. Former NHL player Craig MacTavish killed a woman while driving drunk, went to jail for a year and missed playing for 1 season. Got his name on 4 Stanley Cups afterwards and is currently an assistant coach for the St. Louis Blues. The current premier of Saskatchewan province in Canada, Scott Moe, caught drunk driving twice as a young man. Later caused an accident in which someone was killed, but the police could not prove DUI that time. Got a ticket for dangerous driving instead. Edit. One more I almost forgot. Renowned beatnik author William Burroughs killed his common law wife. Supposedly they were playing a William Tell game, only he missed the target. Friend of mine grew up in Saskatchewan and would tell me stories about how popular booze cruising was when they were teenagers. Just get a bunch of buddies in a car and drive around getting shit-faced. My buddy said he would do it with friends almost weekly. He of course knew kids who died in drinking and driving accidents. CeeLo Green. In 2012 he slipped a woman an ecstasy pill without her knowledge and raped her while she was unconscious. She woke up naked in his bed with no memory of what happened. His charges were eventually lowered to a felony of supplying ecstasy. In response to backlash, he tweeted, "People who have really been raped remember, and if someone is passed out they are not even with you consciously, so with implies consent." Edited because sex with an unconscious person isn't sex, it's rape. Thanks to those of you who pointed out my wording. Oh my fucking god, that last tweet is vile. Travis Scott and his Astroworld event that killed multiple people while he told everyone to put their middle fingers up to the ambulance that was trying to save the dying people. Deleted. The lobotomy of Rosemary Kennedy. I know it's not really a single celebrity, but I don't ever see it talked about. Outrage. I think about or go back to that at least once every year since reading about it. IDK. Something about it pains me so terribly that not only was she lobotomized, but hidden away from family who loved her, but not enough to break the mold and fight for her. Imagine how lonely she must have been. Ugh. Didn't Caitlyn Jenner hit and kill someone with her car? I don't forget about this cause it was a running South Park joke for like 2 years. Charlie Chaplin had multiple affairs with teenage girls and was accused of sexually abusing them. Orachon Thifasad in Narayudhaya. In 2010, a 17-year-old girl named Orachon Thifasad in Narayudhaya was driving one of her father's cars without a proper driver's license. She was texting and driving, and slammed into a passenger van that was carrying 14 people. She killed 9 of the passengers, and seriously injured the rest, causing a massive pile-up on the highway. After the accident, she seemed to be unfazed and unhurt. She got out of the car, plopped her purse on the ground, and continued texting. Someone took a photo of her in that moment, and once it was passed around in the press, the public was understandably outraged. Her wealthy parents paid for a lawyer, of course, and they somehow brought the sentence of 3 years in jail for driving without a license down to just a few months of community service. Even then, she was so spoiled she often refused to show up to her duties volunteering at a hospital, and complained the entire time. I had to look her up, but goddamn, that picture of her texting is infuriating. This website has pictures of the aftermath of the crash and her just chilling next to her completely destroyed car. Suoli pressed the phone at the crime scene. The case was even more indignant. Not sure if anyone's mentioned it on the thread yet, but there's a podcast called Behind the Bastards that's this exact premise, talking about famous people who are actually giant pieces of garbage. They back everything up with research and span all sorts of dictators, grifters, fake doctors, etc. Coco Chanel. Let me guess. Nazis? I read some comments and to my surprise didn't see Alfred Hitchcock, who repeatedly abused actresses he worked with. Ted Kennedy. Left a young woman to drown in his car. No consequences. This is just one that you can't believe. I always heard about it, and never thought much about it, until one day I read about it in detail. He actually returned to the party, tried to get help, but then, when that failed, jumped into the water, swam back to his hotel room, and went to bed. The worst part about it is that it seems that she was still alive for some time, trapped in an air pocket, and if he had raised the alarm right away, she wouldn't have died. I can't believe that if he hadn't been who he was at the time, there wouldn't have been consequences.